You may be familiar with biryani, but today we're gonna make a version that's a little bit different. It's straight from the Middle Ages, and we're gonna be cooking outside over an open fire in a pot sealed with dough in the traditional dum-cooked method. We're gonna try to recreate what biryani would have been like when it first came onto the scene in the 1500s. Hey there, I'm Sohla el-waylly, and this is Ancient Recipes with Sohla. In each episode, we take a dish you may recognize and attempt to recreate one of the oldest versions of it to ever exist. So it's a little cooking, a little history, and a whole lot of me. What's not to love? All right, I'm stoked for today's episode. It's one that ties into my ancestral heritage, and it's super delicious. Biryani is a dish of rice and meat layered together with a whole lot of spices. And it's all cooked together in a pot sealed with dough. I grew up eating a lamb version that we had for every single important occasion. Birthdays, deaths, funerals, divorces, all of them. Biryani actually originated in Iran and came to the Indian subcontinent when the Mughal Empire invaded in the 1500s. The Mughals brought over Persian cooking prowess, along with foods like pilaf, biryani, and kebabs. From there, biryani mixed with native spices and ingredients and took off in popularity. The name for biryani comes from the Persian words biryan, which means fried before cooking, and birinji, which means rice. One really fun legend about biryani's origins says that Mumtaz Mahal, who inspired the Taj Mahal, was touring a barracks and saw how undernourished the Indian soldiers were. She ordered a meal of meat and rice to be made, and there you go, biryani. So like I mentioned, we're gonna try and make a version of what biryani would have been like when it first arrived in areas like modern-day India and Bangladesh in the 1500s. First up, I'm going to make the marinade. Boom. We've got our big pot for mixing things up. I'm gonna start with yogurt. So marinating meat in yogurt was something that was really common in the Mongol Empire, which eventually became the Mughal Empire. So they definitely would have brought this technique with them to the Indian subcontinent. So marinating in yogurt is gonna make our goat really nice and tender and juicy, and also it kind of gives you a little room for error in case, you overcook it. I'm also gonna add some mint and coriander. So the Portuguese, when they first arrived in the 1500s, would have brought chilies with them, but it took a bit before the chilies were incorporated into the diet. So they wouldn't have had chili powder, but instead we're gonna go for some native spices, turmeric, cumin, and garam masala. Garam masala is a mix of spices. Garam masala just means like warm spices. So none of these are hot. These are like the warm ones, like cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, like holiday vibes almost. Cumin's actually been in use for a long time. The first mention of it dates back over 5,000 years, where they would use it to mummify Egyptian pharaohs. And there's also a few mentions of it in the Bible. People like cumin. All right, salt going in. Salt, just like the yogurt, is going to help make it taste good and also tenderize, make sure that we keep it moist, give us a little room to groove if you overcook it a touch. Now this is ginger garlic paste, which is just a paste of ginger and garlic. You see this a lot in food from this area. You just blend up your ginger and garlic way in advance, and then it's good to go. You've got it for when you need it. Now I'm gonna stir this all up together before I add our goat, and we're gonna evenly toss our goat in here and let it hang out. It's okay if you just only have 30 minutes to let it marinate, but it's better if you can let it go overnight. Okay, now we're gonna add the goat. So we're using bone-in goat. Oh, let's lift. We're going with bone-in goat, and it's best with a tougher cut like leg or shoulder because it's gonna cook a long time. And if you go for something lean, it's just gonna dry out. Goat is what probably was most commonly used. Nowadays, people get crazy. They make seafood biryani, vegetable biryani. I made a bean biryani, but depending on who you ask, that's not biryani, that's sacrilege. Some people believe it must be a dark meat, but you know what? Whatever. You do you. It's the future now. So make it out of whatever you want. Now I'm gonna mix this all up. So garam masala, it literally means warm spices. And a lot of the old cookbooks, they don't actually specify the spices. They just say warm spices. So we made an educated guess about what it is exactly. In the Ayurvedic traditions, it's said that those warm spices help warm you up. So it's good to have when it's cold out. Now we're gonna go on to cooking the rice. The most important part, and then we're gonna go outside and cook over fire. Biryani, more than anything, is a rice dish. So this is the most important part. Like, you can mess up the meat, you can mess up your spicing, but if you mess up your rice, you will bring shame upon your family. Shame. 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 First step is get the right rice. Biryani is always made with Basmati rice, and you want to make sure that you're getting like the highest quality Basmati you can find. That means we want something that's aged extra long, and preferably something called Sohla, which means parboiled. The parboiling step makes it just stand up to the cooking a little bit better. It also makes it more nutritious. And now, washing the rice is really important. I have the world's biggest bowl. I think this is the biggest bowl we have. The biggest bowl we have, because when you're washing your rice, you want to make sure you got a lot of room to groove, to swish, so you can gently swish the rice without breaking the grains. If you try and do this in a smaller bowl, not only are you not going to properly rinse it, but the rice is going to like scuff up against each other too much and start to break and crack. And the real beauty of Basmati rice is that the grains are really nice and long and they cook up really fluffy. So I've already washed this rice in several changes of water. You want to wash it until it's mostly clear. It's never going to get totally clear, but you want to be able to see your hand through it. That's the key. And then I let it soak in this water for about 15 minutes. You want to go for like 15 minutes to an hour. I think you should always soak any rice you cook. It's just going to help it cook more evenly. But with Basmati, it's especially important because it's going to make sure that those grains stay nice and long and they don't break during that cook. Okay, my rice is soaked. We're going to drain it, and then we're going to parboil. Shall we drain? And now we're going to parboil it. This is a really important step, and you see it in a lot of Persian rice dishes, which makes sense because that's where this comes from. So I have a lot of vigorously boiling water. Pros they just know how much water and salt you need. But if you're a beginner, I think a good rule of thumb is for each cup of rice, 1 quart of water and a 1/4 cup of salt. So here I have 8 cups of rice, 8 quarts of water, and 2 cups of salt, which I know you're like, oh my God, that's a lot of salt. But this is the only opportunity for the rice to get seasoned. The majority of that salt is going to be drained off, so you really got to go for it. This dish is all about the rice. We need that rice to be flavorful. So I'm just going to stir this to dissolve the salt, and then we're going to add the rice all at once. Now, parboiling the rice means we're going to cook it until it's almost all the way through. You're going to bite into the grain and see a little bit of white at the core, and that's what you want because it's going to finish cooking in the pot. Cooking Basmati rice like this is how you get it like really long and fluffy. I want to get that vigorous bubbling back, and then we're going to add all of the rice at once. And then it just sinks to the bottom of the pot. And you know that your rice is close because it all just comes bursting to the surface. You get in there, you taste, break a grain, see if you've got that little core of white, and we're good to go. Okay, let's go in here. All the rice at once. Whoops, whoops. It's a very large bowl. Could I have a GIF assist? Just with the bowl.
GIF assist.
See, I think biryani you need to make with a friend, because this isn't even a big batch, to be honest. This is like a half batch to some folks. I've seen batches that are 4 or 5 times bigger than this, so you really need a friend to help you with the draining and the dumping and the layering. We're gonna get in here and rinse off that last bit of rice. It's getting, we're not leaving, no grain left behind, you know? Yeah, excellent, okay. I don't need that anymore, thank you. As soon as you add the rice, it just sinks to the bottom, all the bubbling stops, and you're usually there with your par cook when the boiling comes back and it all comes back to the top. This is not a time to multitask. Don't go anywhere, don't chop onions, don't tend to your children. Now's the time that you stand here and you stare into the pot and you just wait. Depending on the quality of your rice, it can take anywhere from 3 minutes to 8 minutes. It really depends, you know, on the rice, on how well you rinsed it and how long you soaked it. So just don't go anywhere. I can feel we're getting close, so I'm gonna get my drain set up ready. Okay, so once We have the perfect texture, you know? The rice is doubled in size, but you still have that little core of raw in the center. We're gonna drain the rice, and then you gotta rinse it in cool water to stop the cooking, or it can just like break and become mushy. So just be prepared. I have my strainer ready. I have my GIF ready. GIF's gonna do this training, because I think it's gonna be a little heavy for me.
GIF assist.
You got this, GIF. Yeah. All right. Look at how much rice it is. It's crazy how much it swells, and it's not even fully cooked. Okay, I think we did it. It looks correct. I'm gonna take this to the sink, rinse it with some cool water, and then we're gonna go outside and cook over fire. I have to rinse it or we're gonna lose it. We're gonna lose the rice, guys. So our rice has been parboiled, our goat is nicely marinated, and we've got all of the pieces to now layer our biryani. Okay, so I've never done this over coals, so might be a disaster. We'll find out together, but this is how they would have done it. Biryani means fried, so we're gonna start off by frying some onions with some ghee. All right, I've got like a cauldron of ghee. It looks like a lot of ghee, but you really can't skimp on the ghee with biryani. This is like a luxurious dish. And then to this, I'm gonna add thinly sliced onion, and we're gonna cook this until it's lightly browned and then scoop it out. The onion's gonna flavor the ghee. It makes it very savory. And this is the beginning step for a lot of dishes from this region, from India and from Persia. Now, ghee itself has a very long history dating back to 2000 BCE. Ghee is pretty much butter that has the water cooked out and the milk solids removed. It's pretty similar to clarified butter, except you brown the solids. And what that does is give the ghee like these antioxidant properties so it doesn't go rancid as quickly. It started out in northern India, but then became really popular in southern India, which makes sense because it's hotter there. So butter probably went bad faster. And because we're removing those milk solids, it pretty much becomes an oil and we can fry in it. Biryani likely had precursor types of food dating back to ancient Persia. The Mongols conquered Persia under Genghis Khan in the Middle Ages and then went on to invade northern India in the 16th century. This is how the empire likely brought Persian food to the region. I have a little bit of golden browning happening. Not everything is brown, but that's okay because these are gonna continue cooking. So I'm gonna scoop them out of the pot now, and we're going to save this to put on top. This technique you see a lot. Like I can't think of a Bangladeshi dish that doesn't start with frizzling some onions. We're not caramelizing, we're frizzling. So it's still gonna have a little bite while the outside gets a little brown. Now, biryani is one of those foods that doesn't have like a, hey, here's the first version ever of it kind of situation. You know what I mean? There's actually a Tamil rice dish called onsuru that dates back to the 1st century. It has a lot of similar ingredients: meat, rice, turmeric, coriander, and it was fed to soldiers at the time. This fat is now super, super, super flavorful. I scooped out like half of it, and we're gonna pour that on top of the rice. Now in the rest of this fat, we're gonna add our spices. Here we've got a little bit of caraway, clove, cinnamon, bay. These are all spices that they would have definitely used at that time. Going in. It's gonna just get a really quick like little toast situation. You don't wanna go too long with bay because it gets acrid, so we're good right there. And now the goat's going in. Okay, so remember how biryani is called fried? This is gonna get like fried a little bit in this fat. This is a really important step that you see in all cultures that have stews. So you see this in Bangladesh, in Persia, in Africa, in the Caribbean. And we're not like searing the meat, but we kind of are. We're searing the spices. It really helps develop a lot of flavor. In Bengali, it's called koshano. And I'm sure that every region has their own name. If you come from one of those places, let me know what you call this technique. All right, it's all going in. The yogurt's gonna kind of caramelize. The spices are gonna brown, but more importantly, this prevents your spices from getting like kind of chalky and gritty, which can happen if you don't take your time with this step. In here. Now, we're gonna cook it in this fat for just like, you know, a couple of minutes. The marinade's gonna darken in color a bit. It's gonna get super aromatic, and that's when you know it's good to go. Persian historian and traveler al-Biruni actually wrote about how he witnessed precursors to biryani when he traveled the Indian subcontinent during the 11th century. This is another indication that biryani might not have turned into its final form until the Mughal Empire invaded, but there were already many similar types of dishes in the area. Okay, so you know that this is ready to go when you see the fat kind of pool on the top. That means that we've kind of switched from simmering to sizzling and all the spices have had time to bloom. Now we're gonna do the most exciting part and the most important part. Every part is the most important part. We're gonna layer now. All right, so we're just gonna add a layer of rice and some herbs. Now, modern biryani has potatoes and prunes and maybe some other stuff. My favorite part of all biryanis are the potatoes and the prunes. So I'm really excited to see what it tastes like without my favorite parts. Wild, right? So here we have some more chopped mint and coriander like we had in the marinade. I'm gonna sprinkle half of this over the top of here. Boom, boom. And then the other half's going on later. Now we're gonna add our rice. Oh, that we spent so much care to making sure that it was cooked properly, par-cooked properly. So we're just gonna rain it down, one even layer. I like to kind of rake it in so if there's any clumps, we can open them up so that we can get good steam action throughout and get that rice fully cooked. Saffron is actually legendary in antiquity. It's from this region and it blooms for about a week a year. It must be hand harvested quickly or it can wilt, and there's only 3 stigmas per plant. So now I'm gonna add a little bit of salt, and this is just gonna help us grind it up. We wanna grind this up into kind of a powder. And then I'm going to add some water to bloom it, and we're gonna add this to our pot. We're already there. That's an easy smash. I'm gonna add a little bit of water to help this bloom. This is some of my rice cooking liquid that I saved. And it's just gonna help it bloom, pull out that color. It like immediately becomes so vibrant. Okay, let's proceed with our layering. Here we've got pot back on. Ooh, that's getting heavy. All right, now let's add the rest of our herbs. Bloop. Whoa, amazing, pretty. My mom does not believe in herbs in her biryani. She is also very anti-tomato. Some people put tomato in there. You know, everyone does their own thing, and everyone thinks everyone else is wrong. It's one of those things. Okay, here's that ghee that I pulled out of the pot earlier, and there's still some like charry onions on there, and that's cool. Just drizzling it on top. I'm gonna top it with these onions. They're gonna get super, super dark as they cook, and sometimes when you open up the pot, it almost looks blackened, but it actually, like for some reason, it doesn't taste burnt. I don't know why. It just tastes really sweet and savory and nutty. Just gonna try and distribute it. The fried onions were always my favorite part as a kid, so my mom, whenever she made them, she'd make extra, and I would just eat them plain. I'm gonna use the back of this wooden spoon to poke some holes in the rice, just so that the steam, you know, has some channels to flow upwards. Whoa, fun. Now I'm gonna add a little bit of that cooking water. So this is gonna create steam to cook our rice, keep the goat nice and moist. Cool. Now, the saffron. It's gonna get so pretty, like immediately. Now, stuff like knowing exactly how much water to add, that really depends on how big of a batch you're making and what your heat source is. So I'm totally guessing, and this could totally just burn or be too wet. I don't know, we're all gonna find out together. Now, extra little fun bit. So, before I top this off, we're gonna stick a live coal in there, So I've got this little cast iron skillet. I'm gonna nestle it in right on top, and I'm gonna put a light coal in there, and that's gonna create some smoke to give it a lot of flavor, but it also kind of vacuum seals the pot, almost like a pressure cooker. I've got my coal. We're gonna pop this in here. Now to get a little smoke happening, as soon as I add the ghee over the coal, it's gonna really start smoking, so I wanna get this lid on right away. Ghee. Whoops. And let's seal her up. This is gonna be hard because this pot is already hot. So this is just like flour and water. Standard like roti dough. Nothing fancy happening here. Ugh. And we use it to seal up this pot. Nowadays, I feel like a lot of people use Dutch ovens, which have like really nice and heavy lids, but with like an aluminum pot, you really do need to go for this dough situation. So this is called dum, and it's like pretty much this process of it steaming together. And I think dum means like breath, so it's like the breath of the biryani. So now there's nothing left to do but top it off with some coals, and we're gonna cross our fingers, cross our toes, pray to all of the biryani gods, and hope that when you open it up, it's okay. All right. Okay. All right. See you later. Okay, our biryani has cooked on and around the coals for 2 hours. We let it rest for about an hour, and now it's time to crack in. I'm like not sure what to expect. It smells good, so hopefully that means it is good inside. Before I bust into that, I'm gonna crack a little bit of mastic with some water. And mastic is a tree resin, so it's gonna give us like a little nice piney aroma. It's used a lot in that region. You even use it in like cookies. You use it from everything from savory food to sweet. And it's just like a nice like aromatic thing. So we're gonna bust this up. It breaks really easily. And then add a little water to dissolve it, and it's almost like you're making your own like extract kind of situation. You know what I mean? Mastic is also something that some people just like chew like gum. Like if you take a chunk of it and just start chewing on it, boom, nature's gum. Okay, a little bit of water to dissolve it, just like we do with the saffron. Same kind of vibe. Some people love this stuff. Some people hate it. I think it doesn't matter how many times you've made biryani before. It's always, this part is always like, oh, like I think this is a dish for people who are like into that adrenaline rush. So now we're gonna break off the bread or the dough. And it's super dry and tough. No one really eats this. This is just, this served its purpose. You know how a lot of those English pies have, those old English pies have this crust called a coffin that no one actually ate? This is like that equivalent. It's like a cooking tool. You don't eat this. But it was always my favorite part as a kid, ripping the dough off. Okay, it's almost time to get in there. I did try to eat it when I was a kid, which is why I know it's not delicious. Okay. I think it might be good. Hold on. Rice looks good. Our little coal has done its job. Let's pop that out. Ooh, it's hot. All right, I'm gonna remove this dish. So you can see the onions got really dark from just hanging out in there. The rice is properly cooked. That's the most important part. But we're not gonna know what's going on to the goat until we platter it up. But before that, I'm gonna pour this mastic over. A little final hit of flavor. Now, I'm gonna serve it up. You don't just like dig in there with a spoon. You need to plate it really nicely. So, I'm gonna start by, ooh, wow, the rice came out good. Okay, rice is a success. So you wanna plate it pretty much in layers. You take off one of the layers at a time. We only have 2 layers here, but sometimes they have a lot of layers. And you take off one layer at a time and like re-layer it inverted. There are other rice dishes similar to biryani where people just flip the whole thing over. Whoa, wild. What I really like is the rice that's right along the side of the walls sometimes gets really nice and crunchy. I think that part's really tasty. Now you see the saffron kind of stains some of the rice yellow, so you end up with this like confetti vibe. Okay, now let's get in there and get that goat. Whoops. Come on. Okay, some of my goat got a little extra color. I think I need to practice my cold biryani technique a little bit more. It takes a few tries to really know how to control the heat, to control that browning. So this got a little browner than I would have liked, but I think it's still gonna be delicious. The meat's really nice and tender. It's falling apart as I try to scoop. Just looking at this though, I miss the potatoes. The potatoes are my favorite bit. Okay, we got some extra crispy goat. But you know what? I think it's still gonna be tasty. Okay, I guess it's time to dig in, yeah? Should I plate it up? Let's plate it up. I need to get a little rice, I need to get a little goat, and then this bit, these little bits, these are my favorite bits. I know it's like extra crunchy and dark, but yeah, that's my favorite bit. I love it. Okay, where do I go from? Let's dig in right here. There's a little bit of blackening happening, but that's what I was kind of worried about. It's kind of hard to know how much coals to put under there, but look at the goat. It's really nice and tender. So even though I overcooked it a bit, it's still super tender and super moist, and that's the point of marinating your meat. It gives you a little room to groove, you know? If it gets a little bit over, it's still super, you can see it's like glistening. Yeah, that's tasty. The goat is really tender and moist. The most important part, the rice, is totally perfect. You can look right here. All of the grains are intact and like fluffy. Nothing broke, nothing got clubbed together. They're perfect and long. Each grain of basmati grew to its full potential, and that's what you want to see. So overall, I think this is like, for my first time cooking biryani outside over fire, I think my mom would be very proud. This was fun to try one of the first ever versions of biryani. I can't wait to go home and practice cooking this over coals. It was really fun for me, and it did add like a lot of nice smoky flavor. I wouldn't say that this tastes very different from a modern biryani. This tastes very much like a biryani from Iran or Pakistan. You don't really see chilies or tomatoes in biryani until you go to India, so I'm not really missing anything. I think it's just like, it tastes very authentic to that region. That's the thing with biryani. There's so many different versions. You can't just be like, oh, this is missing this is missing that. Although some people argue that their biryani is the one and true biryani. I don't believe that. I think this is great, just like, this can hold its own right now. I think that's really cool how even though this is an old recipe, it still feels like it hasn't changed much now, even today. What, like 500 years later? If you like this episode, be sure to like and subscribe. And if there's an ancient or vintage recipe you want to see me try out, let us know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.